Hey everybody, Larry, Fort Worth Memories Museum and Group, and Hometown Heroes, and this is Thanksgiving week.
Thanksgiving week,
Ooh.
episode 21.
Oh my
21.
goodness.
Rick and Mary, and y'all can introduce your guest and let's get going.
Okay. Mary, how are you today?
I'm good. How are
I'm
you?
doing good. We just finished the roll call and got another one coming up, don't
We do, yeah. Whenever we get to this time of the year, because of the holidays, of course, we have to make some changes. You know, you don't want to have a luncheon the Friday after Thanksgiving. Everybody's still at home in a turkey coma. It just doesn't work. So we are fortunate the church works with us. So we just had our luncheon for November this past Friday. Our next one is coming up on the 9th of December. And as we like to do, we always like to have entertainment in December. So we have a comedian that will be with us. Happens to be a retired Air Force. So this is going to be a really good time for us. And RSVPs are open. So if you go to the roll call webpage and you on the home page, scroll down the lower left corner, you can RSVP right there. It takes you less than a minute. So it's a real easy process. It's working great. So far we're over two. We opened it yesterday. We're well over 200 already.
So this is the new system.
This is the new system. And like I said, working like a charm takes less than a minute and over 200 already.
Super.
And you're going to be back from your trip for that meeting.
That morning.
Okay.
I found out this morning that the leaving Hawaii at 8 in the morning or on the 8th equals getting into DFW about 7 o'clock in the morning on Friday. So it'll be a real short turnaround for me.
Yeah, that's a short trip anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, the 2 through 8 to take 2 World War vets. So Don is going to go back to Pearl Harbor. And Carl Flinner, a new World War II vet of ours, 11th Airborne, and he's going to be there. So it's going to be hopefully a good, I'm sure it'll be a somber trip, for those guys, but it should be a good trip. American Airlines, and really it's sponsored by Black Rifle Coffee. So they are really awesome at making sure that these vets get there. They've got some Marines that are going to join them while they're there.
That's cool.
So they'll be doing a lot of different events with the Marines while there, which is awesome because, of course, Don is a Marine. So that's kind of fabulous. He's really looking forward to it.
That's good. Today we have a special guest. I've known this guest all his life. Well,
And all of your life.
I've known of him almost all his life, and I got to meet him when he was a couple of days old because back then, kids couldn't go to the hospital and see their new sibling. So this is Ken Irving, and back in the audience we have his wife Cindy Irving, and we've got Sterling, the world's greatest grandson named Sterling. He's here kind of working the boards back there
Working
with
the boards, yeah.
Tyler and Dusty. Kenny, or Ken, I always call him Kenny, but it's hard.
Well, I'm trying to go back to Ken.
How are you? Oh,
Either way.
Whatever I call you, answer. He's a patriot. He's a great American. He loves our country. He respects our flag, and he gives honor to our military, veterans, and first responders. And he's a Navy veteran, and he's very involved. He and Cindy are very involved with an organization called Brotherskeepers that helps severely wounded and injured military and first responders, and we'll visit a little bit about that. But our dad was a World War II United States Marine veteran that whenever he went to war, he stayed about 2.5 years over in the South Pacific, going from island to island. And our parents, mother was from Cisco, Texas, and Daddy, he was from Abilene, Texas. They didn't know each other until after the war, but tell us a little bit about being raised by a United States Marine.
Well, it's different. It's tough. When he was close to the end of his life, Mother told me the toughest thing she ever did was be married to a combat Marine, but she'd never, do it. She wouldn't change it. But just as a kid, he taught us how to put our hands over our hearts or stand up for the flag. Or we always knew somebody from the World War II through
Yeah.
him. So got to
But it
meet a lot
wasn't-
of the old vets.
Don't you wish you could go
Oh,
back
yeah.
and talk to them and ask them all the stuff you'd like to ask them now?
No, after Dad passed away, I got more questions
Yeah.
now. That I sat him down once or twice and said, "You got to tell me everything about the war. I want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly." And he went into, told me everything. And so a couple of times he'd tear up about it. And it was a tough
Yeah.
situation for him and all those Marines.
Yeah, because he had
Everybody.
what we now know as post-traumatic stress, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he was
Sure.
He was in and out of psychiatric VA for like a couple years.
a
And
couple of years.
I've heard stories where, mother tell me that they get ready to go somewhere with another couple and they're all dressed up and the car would backfire and he'd hit the ground, just is always paranoid.
And she told me a story, and probably you too. They lived in a little apartment in Cisco. And of course, back then we didn't have air conditioning, so the windows were open at night. And the leaves started rustling. They were asleep. And he just immediately, whenever he heard that rustling, he just grabbed her and threw her on the floor and got down to the floor because he thought there was some enemy there. or something.
Sure.
And I never did hear him talk very much about it, but one time we went to, he worked for General Dynamics, and they had the management club meeting, and there was a fellow there, not a former Marine, but a Marine named Pappy Boynton, Medal of Honor
Wow.
recipient. And he was over there in the South Pacific, and there was a line of people to talk to Pappy, and these guys, one of the engineers at General Dynamics had drawn a picture of Pappy's plane, and we were going to get it signed. And, he was kind of shuffling everybody through. And whenever Daddy walked up there, he said VMSB 244, and man, Pappy just stopped everything. And because they had been at the same island together at one time, and they started talking Marine stuff. So,
Well, when they were bombing Revolve from Bougainville, and you had all the planes coming up in the air from different islands, my dad said he was a rear gunner on SBD dive bomber, and he said that somebody would come over the radio, Pappy's with us. You had B-25s, you had dive bombers, you had fighters. He said literally the sky was just covered with planes. But he said, it's kind of neat because Pappy had, everybody knew about Pappy Boynton.
because he'd flown with the Flying Tigers in Burma before we entered the war, I think.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, I think so. I think, if history serves me correct, but he, one thing that I remember as a kid was we learned to sing the Marine
Oh,
Corps
yeah.
hymn, and I always say before I learned to sing Jesus Loved Me, I sang the Marine Corps hymn. So
Yeah, that's true.
he was a United States Marine for sure.
Well, Mom was a Marine wife, and
Yeah.
she took that,
And he
the
took us.
love for it.
He took us to parades and took us different places as children to kind of give us a life experience. And one of those life experiences was a very historic day.
It's today.
It's today,
59 years
59
ago.
years ago. And Kenny and I, we never talked about what we felt, how we saw everything, until it was 2013, and some guy called you. What did he say?
He just, I guess he got the clipping from the newspaper that the 25th anniversary.
It was 25 years before then, wasn't it?
Our mother, I guess she got her story in there, and I wrote a paper for college, shaking hands with history, and they put a portion of that, and they interviewed you, but he found my name, and we all hooked up together. I was kind of shocked.
And he was a producer,
Yeah.
a film producer for National Geographic.
Hmm.
And he called you, and then you had him call me, and then he had us go out to
I'll
where
go
they
out to Cars
thought
One.
where they thought Air Force One had been parked that morning. And then they did this documentary JFK, the final hours, I think. Tyler, can you play that video?
Is that the Bill Paxton video?
Yes, sir. And this is just our part in the video.
After a 35-minute ride, the motorcade arrived at Carswell Air Force Base with a short flight to Dallas. Ten-year-old Rick Irving and his 6-year-old brother Ken were there with their mother.
We started seeing a lot of people scurrying around Air Force One, and then the sirens got closer and closer. And then all of a sudden, the president's limousine stopped at the end of the rope line, and he and Jackie got out and started shaking hands. And my mother pushed us right next to the line as he was coming down and said, "Put your hands out, put your hands out." And so we put our hands out and shook hands with the president and then with Mrs. Kennedy.
I remember her hand more than anything. Even though I was 6 years old, she felt very feminine, small hand, her white glove.
But one of the things that I remember was how warm his hand was. He had ridden from downtown in an open car. And for a kid that was 10 years old, I thought, how could he have such warm hands?
Part of the Kennedy persona is that the Kennedys obviously loved and trusted each other, but they didn't express any real physical affection in public. But there was a moment at Carswell Air Force Base when Kennedy grabbed Jackie's hand. They held hands for just a few seconds, and very few photographers caught it. But it was a magic moment for all Kennedy fans.
Then we went to
Okay, that's the video, our part of the documentary. But they talked about Kennedy and Jackie holding hands, and then we saw this picture, and they're headed toward Air Force One. They aren't holding hands at that moment that picture was taken, but in the left-hand side of that picture, you can see us at the rope line. So that would tell me that we were pretty close. I mean, we were right in front of Air Force One, but we were pretty close to the very last people that shook hands with President Kennedy and Jackie that day in Fort Worth. And we were talking the other day about when we found out, because Mama told us we weren't having to go to school, which was a real treat, but I couldn't remember when it was, and you said that it was that morning.
Well, from what she told me, Dad called from GD and asked, have you taken the boys to school yet? And she said no. Well, get them to Carswell because it might be the only time they get to see a president. So sure enough, she took us to Carswell. From what I can remember her telling the story is we were one of the very last cars to come through the gate and before they shut it down to the public, and we were parked pretty far back from the barricade. And she grabbed us and she pushed her way through the crowd and got us to the front.
And it was just a little rope. I mean,
yeah.
It wasn't
Not a big
barricade or anything. And that kind of shocked everybody because they weren't expecting, he wanted to be with the people. So they kind of shocked that he came to shake hands.
Oh yeah, he was always, it was his deal, and it gave the Secret Service fits,
Yeah.
because he'd just walk right up to fence lines or whatever, kiss the babies.
And he wanted to ride in that open car in Dallas.
Yeah.
They wanted to put a protective bubble over it. But our mother, at that time, she worked for the Fort Worth Welcome Service. And one of our, probably our best memories was whenever we'd have to, because she didn't do babysitters, so if we weren't in school, we had to go with her and sit in the car. But Miss Baird's was a sponsor, and they had these big boxes of all their products, and we would go early in the morning when we'd go with Mama, and drive through Mrs. Baird's, like the trucks, right through the building, and get that fresh bread. Sometimes it's still hot. And so we had apparently done that before we went there or afterwards, because after we saw the president, she had some appointments. And so that's when we found out that President Kennedy had been shot and killed. And tell them about that.
My mother went in for to meet the people. These are new people moving into Fort Worth, so the welcome service take a box of bread and cinnamon rolls and
Coupons.
tickets to the theater and welcome them to Fort Worth. And she made her first call, I guess it was, and she came out to a car crying. And it's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? The president had been shot. I don't think they hadn't pronounced him dead yet, but he had been shot. And she said, I can remember I started crying, and she said I rolled over in the back seat and buried my face down in the seat and cried myself to sleep. And after that, when we got home, we just stayed glued to the TV the whole weekend. And
Because we were just little. You were 6 years old, and I was 10 years old. And it was pretty traumatic because we had just touched that person. And, another thing is that we actually saw the pink dress and the gloves and touched the gloves of Jackie. And my understanding is the dress and the gloves are sealed up until 75 years after or something. The family sealed them up. But that pillbox hat, nobody really knows. They think that she gave it to one of her secretary or one of her assistants, but nobody really knows that. But, when we moved from East Fort Worth over to West Fort Worth, we didn't live very far from Lee Harvey Oswald's mother. I forget what her name. She was kind of
Marguerite.
Yeah, Marguerite Oswald.
she lived a block from Stripling Middle School.
Where we went to school. But that whole experience for me, that was a Friday. They had the state funeral on Monday, but it was like a dark cloud was over our country. There wasn't any joy or happiness, kind of like 9/11.
Yeah.
One of those moments in the history of our world that changed everything. And sometimes I think, Kenny and I, either one, could have altered the whole course of history if we had just hung on the president's hand and or grabbed his leg or something and, delayed him just a minute or two. They could have changed the whole course of history.
Never thought of it like that.
Well, I did. But that was just one of those interesting things. And then to have this fella call us 25 years after there had been an article, it was the 50th anniversary, to make that documentary.
One thing going through life, I never even thought of that day. November 22nd, could come, and I never crossed my mind about shaking hands with him until I guess that 25th anniversary.
Yeah.
That's when I started paying attention. Wow, this was bigger than what I understood. What it really was.
They don't honor this day like they do 9/11.
No.
9/11 every year they stop and you see it everywhere. So, and we don't honor this day, and we should, especially here. He spent his last night alive here.
And one thing, this was 50 years after that. We had never seen a picture of us near the president. And this film producer had a film clip, a news clip, and he said, look in there and see if you maybe can see where y'all might be. And so I did that and sent it to him, and then he sent me a picture that he pulled from the film clip. And that kind of spurred my interest in maybe finding some more pictures. So I went over to the archives at the University of Texas Arlington, UTA, and they let me go through thousands and thousands of pictures from that day, and I found another picture where it shows us and the president. So
Now there was one video clip, I guess it was one he sent, that I never remembered it until I saw the video clip, and Miss Kennedy leaned over, and Mother, said, shake hands with Miss Kennedy and tell her hi. and she leaned over down to me and spoke to me, hi, and shook hands with her. And I never remembered that until I saw that video.
Is that right?
I never knew there was another man, and I think I asked him if he was the president. Is that Secret Service man with I guess his coat over his arm? I'm sure he had a weapon underneath there. He's smiling at the crowd ahead of the president, looking at everybody. And I think I asked him if he was the president. I can't remember, but for some reason being that young and being this old now, it's kind of hard to put the two together in some cases.
And one thing I didn't realize until I saw a picture is that I had my Cub Scout uniform on that morning. I guess some kind of deal. So
well, that's
maybe,
part of the being patriotic. Family, you're proud to wear the uniform.
But that's kind of our claim to fame on a very dark day in the history of the world, whenever Kennedy got killed. But our dad, he taught us to respect guns. I mean, we grew up with guns. He never did really own one, but by the time we were 10 or 11 years old, we had guns. We kept them in our closet and went. But that in those times we could.
Rick and I got on that ranch in north of Cisco, and I'd have a 410. He'd have his shotgun or 22. And we'd be out there on a section of land by ourselves with rifles. And I might have been 10 years old, and Rick's 14 or so.
But he taught us a lot about gun safety. Oh my goodness, you didn't mess around with guns.
No, you didn't.
But, he was a good dad. He had his idiosyncrasies, and Mama was a little kind of a tiny little Irish, Dutch Irish woman, and we had this sycamore tree in our front yard, and I don't know how that thing could produce branches so low to the ground, because you knew you were kind of in trouble whenever she let you go select the switch. But if she went out there to get the switch off the tree, you knew you were in deep trouble. She never did.
Limbs.
I don't remember her ever calling me by my formal names, Richard Stewart, but I sure do remember a lot of Kenneth Joels.
Oh yeah, I do too.
Kenneth Joel, I'm going to go get a switch.
Or I go get one for her. Come back in with the smallest one, but
that time in history that we grew up as children in the 50s, like Larry, that was a good time for America. All these families had come back. Men had come back from war. They had families. The economy must have been fairly good because there's a lot of jobs, at least around here, until they'd have a layoff at Convair. But and I think Mama was pretty frugal because she helped a lot of people too. And I don't ever remember Daddy ever saying, "Don't help these people." But there was a lot of times I would remember us going to the grocery store, and she'd buy 2 or 3 bags of groceries, which weren't little bags like we have now, but big paper sacks, and fill them full of food, and take them to somebody's porch, lay them up there by the door, and leave, because she knew of a need. And Daddy, he was a kind of guy that worked all the time. I mean, if Convair was open or General Dynamics later, he was there unless he was in the hospital, and he could be pretty sick and still go to work. But
I remember the nurse at General Dynamics calling Mom and just, Mr. Irving's real sick, you got to come and get him. And he just basically refused to leave, and they forced him to leave because he'd be real sick. And next thing you know, he's going back to work again. I seen him go to work when he was in bad shape.
Yeah, but he was a good dad, and he talked about the way he taught us patriotism and the love of our country, and we've passed that on to our children, and they passed it on to their children, because I think all our grandchildren and our kids, they love America. And I just want to kind of brag, the world's greatest grandson named Sterling's here, and about 2 months ago, he was selected by the teachers at his elementary school to be Student of the Month. And that's a
big
pretty
deal.
big deal. But there was a letter that the teacher wrote about Sterling that went along with that. And this is what it said. It said, Sterling Irving, Sterling's brains, heart, and courage shine through every day because he comes to school with a great attitude, a smile, always an amazing, interesting story to tell. He is a true patriot and has more respect and patriotism for our country than most adults. He spends a lot of time outside school at veterans events and loves sharing what he knows and learns with others. He's such a little gentleman. He's constantly straightening up, and he's kind of OCD, but he's constantly straightening up and fixing things for me, always without being asked. He helps his friends anytime they need an extra hand. He has a heart of pure gold. But that part about patriotism and not only loving our country, but coming back to share with others and teach them what he's learned, you know? And that's something that was passed on for 3 generations,
Sure.
you know? So it's important that we instill in our children and our grandchildren that love of the country that's the greatest country on earth.
Absolutely.
Now, after we got a little older, then I got a draft notice and I joined the Army. Dad didn't say, don't join the Army, go join the Marines. I mean, I don't know if he's just glad to get me out of town or what the deal was.
I was.
Yeah, because we always had to share a room, so
Yeah.
you got the
I
room.
thought I was going to be top dog once he left, but you know, after he left, I was kind of like, it got lonely, you know. Even though I had friends and stuff, it's like it wasn't the same after that. But
Because we always, even as teenagers, you know, we'd kind of work together because I had paper routes and you had paper routes and we worked on those.
Harvest Seed Company.
Harvest Seed Company. And then after you got out of the Navy, I guess the first job you had, we went to GoEx, an explosive company, and we worked there for several years. And then we went to General Dynamics and got hired in the same day at those different places. But the thing about General Dynamics that later became Lockheed, even though we both worked there,
Oh yeah.
we'd see each other, you know, outside of Lockheed, but never hardly, maybe once or twice a year we'd see each other because it's so big and
Sure.
Yeah,
you
it's
work in different
enormous.
areas.
Yeah,
So.
what was kind of sad was when he retired, and I knew he wasn't there. It's like, you know, Rick's not here anymore. So, you know, I go walk the, you know, aisles at lunch or something. It's kind of like I drop by and see Rick or something like that, and you know, he wasn't there. He's just is lonely there too. You know, in that regards, like that.
But I went in the Army, and then after I got out of the Army, then you joined the Navy. Why did you join the Navy?
Well, the one thing Dad always, he was big on the Navy. Mother didn't want me to join the Marines at all because, you know, it just, I don't know, being, you know, married to a combat Marine, she just didn't want me going the Marines, but Dad just constantly go Navy. He said I had warm food, a warm place to sleep, and a warm shower was on a ship. He loved the Navy, and you know, he loved the Marines, but he loved that ship, being on the ship, going from one place to another, and he would always just, no, you ought to go Navy, you ought to go Navy. And Uncle Doug, too, was Navy. And hearing some of their stories and things like that, and sometimes I kind of wish I had gone in the Marines for that camaraderie and that strong brotherhood.
Yeah.
But again, I wouldn't trade the Navy experience for anything.
And that's one kind of something that I'm kind of envious of too, is the way the Marines are.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you go to their functions, like their birthday party and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, my husband says that all the time. He says, "I wish I'd joined the Marines and not the Air Force because it's a different kind of
It is.
camaraderie, you know. And that whole once you're a Marine, you're always a Marine,
Yeah.
and it is a unique. They're a small group and they are
You know,
very
like their birthday party, the most senior Marine cuts the cake and serves the most junior Marine.
right.
You know,
And Don,
this could be a general and this could have been a private, and
And Don's going around now. He's the one that's cutting the
Yeah,
cake.
Don's cut a lot of cake. Lord.
Yeah, I'm sure he has.
Yes, a lot of cake.
Yeah, but that camaraderie that the Marines have is just something. But Daddy used to say that I guess the Navy called the Marines seagoing bellhops.
Oh yeah,
because
they did.
they were always having to.
Well, they
Navy
served the Navy.
Yeah, they
The
served.
one story, I don't know if you remember, I've been told the story about Dad when he was going to the Pacific, and he was up in the wardroom, the Admiral's wardroom, to serve food. And, they had the captains and all the officers up there, and, they're back there serving food, and he came up to the Admiral and said, "Sir, would you like a roll?" He said, "Yes." And he picked it up with his hand, set on the Admiral's plate. He said that Admiral jumped up and just went off on him. So, they were the bellhops.
Yeah, they were the bellhops. Yeah. But
That's what I would call Dad after I got in the Navy. Hey, bellhop or jarhead or leatherneck.
But you went to basic in Orlando.
Mhm.
Was it like rides at Disney World or something that you got to ride, or did you really have to?
We went to Disney World. Cindy came there after I
'Cause
got out of
you
boot camp.
You weren't married. Were you married whenever?
No,
you weren't.
we
you
were
got married.
engaged.
Yeah. Okay.
But then, boot camp was a disappointment because I got in boot camp and I expected it to be harder, carry rifles, and we didn't carry rifles back then, and if it got 90 degrees or above, we couldn't go outside on the parade ground and stuff, and it's like, then there was these big guys crying like babies, like, I can't fold my clothes or shine my shoes, and my mom used to do this. It's like, dude, be glad you're not in the Marine Corps.
Oh, yeah.
And I
For
would.
real.
I'd help them shine their shoes or fold their clothes at night, get ready for inspection. And I was disappointed in boot camp, but once I got out to the fleet, that was a different story.
Yeah. Basic training for me in the Army, it wasn't as rugged as I thought it'd be. We had to do a lot of stuff, but the thing I disliked, I finally got used to it, was the days it rained and we'd be out there and have our mess kit with our food in it, and it'd just be filling up with water. It'd be pretty watered down by the time you got finished with your meal. But
That's
other than
like
that-
the Navy the day it rained. When we went to chow, we were inside of a building.
And I don't know about
comfortable.
the Air Force. What they do? Do they stay in when it rains? Or
No, well, when
Mary's
I was
here.
in basic training in
She's retired.
1978, that we didn't stay inside when it rained. I imagine today they might, but back then we didn't. I remember doing the toward the end of basic when we did all the obstacles and everything, and it was cold and rainy in San Antonio, and it was just a nasty day. But we were out there doing what we were supposed to do.
And
So-
that we have 3 Army veterans and an Air Force veteran, and no Marines here today. But one thing that the branches of service all have in common, they all use stars. And the Army and the
Oh,
Marines,
Lord.
they camp out under the stars.
Yeah.
And the Navy, they navigate by the stars. And the Air Force, they rate their hotels with stars.
Sorry.
I've heard that 100 times, and what I always tell people is, we all get to make choices. You just got to choose wisely.
She says that
Do you
all the
want to
time.
sleep on the ground or you want to sleep in a nice warm bed? I don't know. You make a choice.
We were watching the Marines do some landings on the beach, and we're pretty far out, anchored out, but you could still see all the landing crafts. I thought, those poor guys. We're out there. I wasn't fishing, but we had guys up there fishing, and we're all just having an easy day watching all the Marines practice landing and catching sharks. I thought, these guys are catching sharks, and these guys over there in the water. It's just, that's how easy it was for us, and compared to the Marines, what they had to go through.
And you spent your time on the USS Dale, CG-19. That's a
Guided missile,
guided
cruiser
missile.
destroyer.
okay. And how many men were on that ship?
530 something.
There's a picture that came up just a while ago of
Yeah,
one of those missiles.
for
Was
the
that
days, that was the most powerful ship in the world.
Was that a cruise missile or something? Or
No,
was
that's a
something-
Terrier missile. No,
Okay.
it wasn't it was a Terrier missile, but they could lock onto aircraft up 250 miles away, and
Wow.
I'd go topside sometimes when they were launching missiles, first time I went, I didn't realize you needed earplugs because it was loud.
Is that what happened?
Not
to your
only
hearing?
was it loud, it just shook you because, you know, I'm from here to the other side parking lot from the missile, and it just, it scared you to death. And within a matter of seconds, the plane or the drone had been destroyed. They wouldn't actually destroy the drone, they'd explode, but, you know, that's how quick it was, and they could control like 12 missiles in the air, and our sole purpose was to escort the carrier.
For air defense?
Yeah, protect the carrier. Once they launched all their planes, and you know, the other ships, and especially us, would just, you know, go do whatever had to be done.
You were in the East Pac, so you did a couple of med tours over in the Mediterranean Sea.
And North Atlantic.
Okay, North Atlantic. So you went to the Med 2 times, 3 times?
Went there twice.
And then
Spent a lot of times down in the Caribbeans and Guantanamo and that area.
This was whenever we had the Cold War still going. And so, you know, Russia was still the USSR. And you went to the Black Sea, went through Istanbul, and then went into the Black Sea up there. And I guess you had these Russian ships following you around. And
When we came through, I guess that's the Bosphorus Straits. You came out into a big old opening in these cliffs on both sides, and there were 2 Russian destroyers on each side of us. And us and the ship behind us, we're a flagship, and we're just flying through there. And you could see them start coming up behind us, and they stayed with us all the way over to Romania, and they anchored out, waited for us to leave. And we're the first American or Western ship that's been in the Black Sea since the 50s.
Wow. And you went to Romania, didn't you?
I did.
For
Spent a few months there with some F-16s
Okay.
parked outside just to let Putin know we could.
Yeah. Did you get offshore in Romania?
Well, they had, everybody went offshore, you know, went out for the day. Me, I never left the ship. And the only reason I never left the ship because I did not like communism back then, and I did not want to set foot in a communist country.
And you weren't.
So I wouldn't go ashore.
It wasn't because you were incarcerated in the brig.
No,
or anything?
no, not that.
Not like you were in. I didn't want to bring this up, but you know they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, somebody took a picture one time, and you got kind of.
I took several pictures.
You got kind of detained by a foreign government for taking some pictures.
The British Navy, British Army.
Yeah.
We were at Gibraltar, and a friend of mine, we were going to leave the base and go into the little town there, and big tunnel, I mean, huge opening, and you could see the other side of the Mediterranean. I mean, little bitty light, and this man came walking past us, and I said, "Can we go in there?" He said, "Yeah." So we started walking, and you know, through there, and he was behind us, and they had all these different tunnels, and then they had supplies like for nuclear war, you know, fallout shelter type supplies. So I'm taking pictures, and we get a little ways in there, and there's a guard station there, and the guy grabbed us up and said, "They're taking pictures." And they grabbed my camera, and the guy I was with, he said, "No, I didn't take any pictures." Well, it was obvious, man, I was just having a heyday. And I said, "What's wrong?" They said, "You can't take pictures in here." I said, "Y'all need to put a sign outside." And, you know, they called the Shore Patrol, British Shore Patrol, and they came in and got us in a Jeep. And, you know, we're all laughing, cutting up. They were real, you know, it was kind of funny. And
They just don't have a sense of humor.
yeah, they had a sense of humor. That guy walking behind me didn't. But when we got outside the gate, you know, on the way, or outside the tunnel, I said, "You know, y'all need to put a sign up or something." And they pulled out, and he stopped, and he pointed, and that sign was bigger than that wall, about 2 times bigger than that wall, no photography, and all that. I said, "Oh, well," you know. And they took us to the brig. They set us in a cell, had left the cell door, the door open at the, you know, in the cell, and the Shore Patrol, they're cutting up, talking to us, asking us about America. It's no big deal. Then our people came and picked us up, took us back to the ship. And
You didn't get in trouble when you got back to the
no,
ship?
what was interesting though, the commander of that base, sometime later, got called up before the captain, and you know you get real nervous when that happens. And Irving, here he handed me a package, and here's your pictures. They developed all my pictures, but they took all the pictures out of it from the tunnel.
That's good.
And yeah, it was neat. And they gave me the letter that the captain of that base, you know, sent our captain. And
Don't send this guy back over here to take pictures of that crap.
I didn't get that letter, but I'm sure that's one and only time I've ever been in jail. So,
Well, that's
but it was
good.
kind of a fun jail.
Yeah.
Not like
Could have been
most.
way worse.
Yeah,
Oh
could
yeah,
have been.
yeah. They could have made it worse.
Yeah, they could have. So you enjoyed your 4 years in the Navy and then came home and like I say, we worked at the Explosive Company, then we worked for General Dynamics and Lockheed. And
Now one thing I want to give a big plug to my wife because she was a Navy wife, and you know
Oh,
the
yeah.
separation was
Oh, yeah.
very intense. I left her, I
Many
guess 2
times.
months pregnant, and I came home when he was like 2 months old
Yeah.
on my first med cruise, and you know it was tough going through those times, but we wouldn't trade it for anything. And
Because right after you all got married, you had to go back,
mhm.
and then whenever you were back in Mayport, got an apartment, then I drove Cindy out there to Mayport to
well, Jacksonville,
Jackson.
pull the trailer and all
that's
that.
right.
Rick pulled the
Your ship.
trailer there, and I guess y'all got there that Saturday or Friday, and you stayed some that Saturday and left. Then Cindy and I got to spend Sunday together. Monday morning, I shipped out for, I don't know, a couple weeks, something like that, and here she was,
Welcome
never been
to-
away from home,
Oh, I know it.
18 years old, and she's tearing, you know, going to the phone booth and getting the pages, tearing out pages to go look for a job as a court reporter, and no, it is a neat time, neat way to grow up.
Yeah, it was.
I came
Yeah.
home and I told her, I said, they're going to give me $12,000 reenlistment, and you know, we could go to California. I had to catch a ship out of California, and she said, no, you get that 12,000, you go to California. I'm going home. And it wasn't that she didn't like it. She was ready to stay in, you know,
Back
make a
then,
career of it
$12,000
if I had
was a
short.
lot of
Yeah,
money.
that was too much to turn down.
But you know,
Oh, back then, '81, you know, that was a lot of money, $12,000. And
yeah,
what was neat about the $12,000, they paid you cash.
did they?
And
really?
these sailors, you could tell which ones re-enlisted and got their money, because the car dealership outside the base, they had these Camaros out there, and they were all yellow. And you know, you step out of ship, you know, outside and look in the parking lot, and here's all these yellow Camaros, and they walk in there with $12,000 cash and buy them a new car. And it's like, why did you buy a car? We're shipping out. Oh, my girlfriend's going to keep it.
Yeah.
How long have you known your girlfriend? About a month.
Yeah, that's pretty typical.
It
Yeah.
is.
A lot of interesting stories from
Lot
other
of-
people, their
Yep.
lifestyles, and
Yeah. Especially living with them in close quarters like the ship.
oh yeah,
You know, we talked about the influence that our parents had on us. And, you know, another person that really had a lot of impact on us with our livelihood was Mr. Rowe,
oh yeah.
which was my father-in-law. And he had a machine shop just right around the corner at Montgomery and Vickery. And he was like probably one of the best
Oh, he
people
was
that we've
craftsman.
ever been with as far as machine work goes. He was also a World War II veteran. And whenever we were teenagers, when I was a teenager, I worked there, and Kenny was there, and he taught us a trade. And so, you know, it was a great place. There was a lot of guys that
Oh,
came
yeah.
through there that he taught trades that went on to work for aircraft companies, making, you know, many more dollars than he ever made at his little shop. But he passed that on, and he was a great American too.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
he was patriotic, and
Every time I see Sterling, I think of him, Mr. Rowe. I
yeah,
was about to say something to you when you acknowledged Sterling, that Mr. Rowe, BJ, would really love
Yeah.
to sing Sterling.
his name was Vester J. Rowe, but everybody called him Mr. Rowe.
Oh yeah, Mr.
Because
Rowe.
they just had
BJ,
so much
Mr.
respect
Rowe.
for him. But
Yeah, well, Cindy grew up with,
she grew
you know, right across the street
across
from
the
Sue, and
Yeah, our wives grew up across the street from each other.
Oh.
Small
Wow.
world. But you know, part of the things that Kenny does and Cindy, they're with work with a group called Brotherskeepers, And that really, whenever y'all got involved in that, and I started going to some of your mixers and meeting the people, that kind of inspired me to get involved and do work with veterans and military and first responders. But y'all do a lot of things to help paraplegics, quadriplegics, amputees, and not only the person, but the family and the caregivers, because the
they're
caregivers,
involved.
that's a 24-hour day.
Sure.
Because the guy that kind of started, Jack, he's in the center, or no, he's in the picture there in the gray sweatshirt. But Jack was injured in he was a warrior.
Yeah,
He was one of those air control guys,
combat controller.
combat controller.
Oh, yeah.
Great warrior, been many times in Afghanistan, probably
He was
Iraq.
on the main invasion. They protected, they guarded Saddam's son's palace. So I have a picture of him sitting at the desk, Saddam's son with his feet up on the desk, talking on one of the satellite telephones. And their job was to protect the palace, but he was on that first wave going into Iraq.
And Jack, he was, a great warrior and went all these places, and then he got hurt in a parachute, a knot jump, and he got his neck broken.
C3 and C4
And
pinch
so
his spinal.
he's a quadriplegic, but he's the most organized person
Oh,
to
yeah.
put together these trips. You take people to Utah.
Park City, we take the veteran and their whole family. All you gotta do is show up. You don't pay for anything. Cindy could tell you more about that. What we do and everything that takes place, and take their family snow skiing and pay
them
for their
too.
airfare, food, lodging, everything. And we focus on the family, because the veteran, yes, he's been hurt and he's mentally affected too, but it affects the whole family. So
Right.
What's the website? Is it brotherskeepers.org?
yeah, brotherskeepers.org,
Okay.
and you can go to Facebook, but look up Jack Fanning, Jack Fanning Jackrabbit, and that's the whole story. He tells the whole story about it.
One day we'd like to get him on the show, and surely get him to roll call, because he's got an incredible story and such a heart and passion for helping people.
Well, after he got injured, they did a night jump, and he was on his last jump before he graduated from. He's going to the gold team, and they were same level like SEAL Team 6. They would be the ones to go in ahead of SEAL Team 6, or the special forces, special operators, and set up the area and bring in the choppers or whatever. And he had 1 week before graduation. They did a halo jump like 30,000 feet at night, and his night vision goggles twisted, and he couldn't judge the deck, and he hit hard, and he almost died out there in the desert in New Mexico. And anyway, once he experienced all that, I gotta give back. I gotta come up with something. I gotta help others, because so many people helped him. And he came up with Brotherskeepers, and Cindy and I joined early in the very beginning, because I worked with Glenn, and Glenn introduced me to him, and he sponsored me, so we're on the board and everything. But he just had to give back to help other veterans. And
He's the kind of guy, it looks like, that if you'd gotten hurt like that jumping out of an airplane, he still does some skydiving.
he
tandem
does
jumps.
skydiving. One time, I think they took him like 80 meters, underwater,
Yeah.
and he went the deepest, as a quadriplegic. And
Wow.
but he wanted to show these other soldiers and amputees and everybody that's kind of given up that you can do it.
Yeah, you
If
can
I
do
can
it.
do it, you can
Yeah,
do it.
life's not over.
No, we have one Marine that triple amputee, and he's just the most fascinating guy to be around. So happy to be alive. And the first time I met him at Granite Ranch, we were telling him bye, and here he is climbing up in his big truck, one arm, one prosthetic arm, no legs. See you guys later. And he's a big part of Brotherskeepers as far as when he's around, you just like light up. But what's interesting about Jack, he sits there and plans these trips with a stylus in his mouth. Can't use his arms, can't use his feet. He sits there and pokes on his iPad and emails people, make contact, calls people, and things like that. He does a big part of it on his own.
Just fascinating people that
Yeah.
that can overcome the worst things that could happen to you,
Oh yeah.
and then go help others. That's what's so good, is to see these people that go, pay back
Yeah.
the world. So
Now, I've been through a lot with my arms and shoulders and stuff, and what actually keeps me going, I'll sit there and focus. I'll think of Jack, Kenny, and I start getting choked up because I think about these guys and what they went through, and it's like, I got to keep going and think, just focus on them, because
but whenever I see what you've gone through with all these surgeries and having your shoulder taken out and all that, and I think, how do you do it? But that's how you do it, is focus.
I focus on them and her.
Yeah.
She keeps me going.
And she's a caretaker.
No, she's a caretaker. She had to get me dressed this morning and comb my hair and stuff like that. And when having her doing all that for me, it gives me some idea what they had to go through. Double amputees, triple amputees. What they experienced when they went off to war, and sitting there watching their buddies get torn to pieces. They get torn to pieces, and we met so many people, so many men that just.
And one thing I think about whenever I see people like that, we had Randy. He was amputee and had all those severe burns, and you think about all the mental anguish and all the worry and concern they had whenever they came to and knew that things were bad.
Yeah.
And then to go
Right.
through all that they have, all the surgeries, all the
Oh yeah.
physical therapy. Because some people, I knew one guy, and later in life, he had his leg amputated, and that was it. I mean, he was done. He just sat down and he didn't try to do physical therapy, get a prosthetic. He wouldn't even hardly walk. He wouldn't walk on crutches because he fell right after he had it, trying to do it. So he was just done. But you see these other guys that, like Randy, going around on crutches, and these guys with wheelchairs, and they're just remarkable people.
Yeah.
And it's great to be able to help
We were
those
at
people
Granite Ranch one time,
and be
and
around them.
one of the young kids there, he was him and his buddy. They were both there, and they were Green Berets. And Josh had a trait in his neck. Young, he was in his 20s back then, and I have a scar on my neck, and we're all in the pool. And he starts asking me about my neck surgeries and stuff like that. And I go, well, I had this and this. And I said, well, what about yours? Because he had, scars and a trait. Yeah, I had 20-something neck surgeries. I'm going to have one next month. And I'm just sitting there going, my gosh, how do you do that? Because he got strap metal, I think, like in the shoulder, and came out the neck. Something to that effect. But just to sit there and watch him and see him having fun in the pool and stuff like that, just like, my gosh, how do you do it? And these guys, they have multiple surgeries. That one guy that one time, he was on crutches, and talking to him, he had these pins coming out of his toes, and they were all spread apart. And I'm sitting there looking at his foot, just, my gosh, that hurts. Finally he says, next week I'm gonna go VA and just tell them to cut my foot off. It hurts so bad. It's like, my gosh, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Some amazing people out there.
Oh yeah.
Well, our time's just about up today, but I want to introduce you to my brother Ken and share our story about our dad, about patriotism, and about our little brush with history on November the 22nd, 1963. So,
That's a day like, I guess would be like Pearl Harbor. Everybody knew where they were,
Yeah.
like 9/11. Everybody knew where they were.
everybody has that story.
Now, if you're,
At
if
work.
you're old enough to remember back in '63,
Yeah.
knew where you were then.
Yeah.
We're kind of up close and up front to the action.
Up close and personal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a day I'll never forget.
Absolutely. But thank you for being on the
I
show.
appreciate it.
Cindy, thank you for getting dressed this morning.
Getting me here.
Sterling, thank you for being here. And Dusty and Tyler, thank you for all the work y'all do over there on the boards and the cameras and the lights. And
I need
we
Sterling.
appreciate it.
Oh, I need Sterling to come back and help work on my generator.
Oh, you don't say don't say
He
that.
tore it apart, and I'm
He's-
still trying to. I need to get in there and start working on it. And I need Sterling to
He'll
help.
probably, that's probably where we want to go this afternoon. Larry, thank you so much for having us.
Our pleasure.
And Mary, thank you for all you do. It's been a very busy month with all the veterans affairs that we've had going on. And
It has.
you know, I saw you the other day at NASJRB Fort Worth, whenever we gave away 500 meals to these military service people and their families. And Mary was out there doing her first sergeant deal. I thought, man, she is a first sergeant.
That's what you do. You got to herd those cats.
Well, you did.
But we had a nice group of roll call folks that came out to the food bank before that, 2 days before, to pack everything up. And then a really nice showing of roll call folks that were there on base helping to pass out the food. And a couple of us were there. 3 of us were there until the very end. We closed the thing down.
And that was the Holidays for Heroes had that money left over from last year, and they gave it to the food bank, $40,000. Kay Granger gave $5,000, gave $45,000 to the food bank. And it's kind of a way they had to do to get the money used to service or to give to our service people.
Yeah,
So,
and the big thing is a lot of people don't realize is that food pantry and everything that they do on the base, it also helps the veterans in the area. So if they can get on base and they need help, and so we did a nice little 2-day notice to get the folks in roll call to know that, hey, we could use to help fill up the food pantry on
they
base.
had a big list.
And he couldn't get everything in his car, which is why I was running late today, because I had the rest of it in my car and I needed to get it dropped off. But we'll do another collection on the 9th of December and help them out.
As they have needs like that too, we might get Larry involved because he's got an audience that likes to give
Sure.
too. So
Yeah, so we've done pretty good, and we've got a couple of organizations that are going to bring some stuff on the 9th, and an organization that's going to actually there's a way that you can donate, and so we've got some things in the work to keep the pantry up and running.
That's good.
And Carrie, I was in class last night, and I got a text from Carrie from Holidays and Heroes. And she said, "You remember when I was on the show and you said you're going to hit 200 this year?" She was at 181 last
Wow,
night.
that's
That's
good.
exciting.
Families, but that's a lot.
That's not just a little bag of gifts. That's
No, it's not.
No,
that's
Yeah.
gifts for everybody.
Yeah.
When are y'all gonna load up with Don and take him to Pearl?
We're going to load him up on the 2nd of December. And so American has put him and Carl Flinner, the other World War II vet, they've put them in first class on the
Wow.
flight. And we're going to accompany him. I can't remember if it's Carl's son or grandson that will be accompanying him. And so we're going to head out there, and they've got quite a few events planned
That'll be a
to
good trip.
commemorate the anniversary
pictures.
of Pearl Harbor. Absolutely. I won't take as good a pictures as Rick, but
No, but still.
you might even get on and do some live feeds and let us know what's going on.
Oh
so
yeah,
we
you can call
share
me
it.
and do a live deal.
Yeah.
We can do that split screen.
Yeah.
Do you know how to do that?
oh, I'll have to figure it out.
Well, you go
You
on,
know, technology is not my friend.
with Facebook. You can go on to Fort Worth Memories, and I can send you a text when I want to be live or whenever it's good for you. And then you go on and you join and you hit some button, and then I accept it, and then it's split screen. We see you and me.
Yeah.
Ah,
'Cause Larry,
yeah.
Larry doesn't sleep, so if it's daylight.
Yeah, well,
there,
yeah, because you
nighttime
know
here-
the time difference is
He'll
is
still
That
something.
works out perfect
Yeah.
for me.
Now, Larry, you've got a special going on.
We're running a special for a 10-day special that's 40 or 50% off, and
That's
it'll be the last sale of the year.
Classic Auto Detail.
Classic Auto Detail, and we still need help on our bikes. We're
You've got
our part, 150 bikes. We're not even close. So
okay.
we got a lot of people. I think people are feeling the economy.
They are.
But you have, how many bikes are you going to give away total?
We're going to try to give away 750.
Okay.
But we've got a lot of restaurants, Fred's Texas, Tim Love's, all of his places, John Bonnell's, all of his places.
I was at Fred's the other day, and he's got a sign up there in the back there, so to remind people that to give, because you get a hamburger and French fries.
Yeah, you get a hamburger and fries. You take them a new bike out there. That's the way to go.
That's good.
I had a lady that came yesterday. We had Elva came and dropped off 4, and then another lady came and said, "Wait a minute. This isn't Fred's." I said, "No." And she said, "I'm taking it to Fred's."
You get a hamburger.
She said, "That burger and
you could
fries
give her
is
a-
about $15.
You give her a tour in the museum.
And it's
yeah.
good.
Oh, yeah, and it's
Yeah,
a
it's a
good
good
burger.
burger.
That's good.
So, and he extended it. Quincy went over and above. It was only an October special, but he extended it until December 15th. So.
And I've got a
that's great.
quick Mr. Rowe story for you. One day I was here, and Quincy walked up there, and we introduced ourselves, and I said, "I'm Mr. Rowe's son-in-law." Man, that guy grabbed me and started hugging me.
Sure
because
did.
he was about 4 or 5 years old. Both his grandfathers had Model A's, J.B. Moats and what was his other grandfather? Oh, Wallace, Chuck Wallace.
Yeah.
They both had Model A's. They were at the shop all the time. And as a little bitty boy, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, he's riding Model A's on Saturdays and go to Mr. Rowe's shop. And he owns Fred's, so he's the president.
I would be in there working on Saturday, and Mr. Rose working on the Model A parts. And here's these doctors, lawyers, these men. You go outside, and right there at a shop, there's 5, 6 Model A's out there, and they were showroom, mint condition.
Oh, yeah.
One day I was in there working, and hey, Kenny, come here. Walked out there and had a Model A on a trailer, and I mean, this thing was bad looking. He goes, "In a few months, that Model A will look just like any one of these."
What
I
would?
said, "There's no way." And some months later, I was in there working. He called me out there and said, "Remember the Model A I showed you?" He said, "There it is." It was just unbelievable.
Quincy still has his grandfather.
Oh, yeah, and they just finished an excursion. It was on Facebook. They were in Oregon or somewhere.
Yeah.
They just take off. And I said, "What happens when they break down?" He said, "We just stop and fix them."
Well, J.B., his grandfather, he'd been the president of the Model A's Club of America or something. And he'd gone to all the states, I think, except Hawaii. I don't know if he ever made it to Hawaii, but he had them all on his trunk, every little state symbol. But
The Rowe engine.
the Rowe engine, yeah, even, it's been 40 years since he did an engine. They still get about $1,000 more if they have one of his engines in them.
Wow.
But it's been fun going down memory lane.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
It has.
I would shake your hand or pat
We
you on
can
the
go
back.
this route.
21st edition
Yep, the 21st edition with my
on the
brother.
22nd of November.
That's pretty special. Larry, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Larry, thank you. Ken, thank you for
No,
being
thank
here.
you.
This
Enjoyed
is Hometown Heroes, and we'll